Hey there, Alex Kidman here, and I've got a confession to make. What is my confession, you wonder? I really like smartwatches. And I have ever since I first strapped one of those OG Pebbles to my wrist. Pebble was a great device. Very simple, very limited in a bunch of ways, but really fantastic value, and I miss it every day. And that brings me rather neatly to today's review topic, the Fitbit Charge 6, because, look, it turned up amidst a wave of smartwatches that I had to review. Things like the Pixel Watch 2 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2, much more high-end devices. And I'll admit that at first I kind of went, right, well, they're more interesting. The Fitbit Charge, well, it's just an activity tracker, isn't it? So it got put to the side, it got left for a little while until I had the time to come to it. And here's the thing. I was wrong to do that because actually this is one of the most interesting wearables I've tested in years. I really like it for a bunch of reasons, and I think it's actually a really sensible device for a lot of people. It doesn't do everything, but what it does mostly very well. Let's get into why that's so. The Charge 6 is built around this vertical 1.04-inch Color AMOLED display, and that, at a specs level, is apparently unchanged from the Fitbit Charge 5. I can't say that I've tested the Fitbit Charge 5, but the specs sit as the same thing. The big physical design change here is the inclusion of a haptic touch button at the side of the Fitbit, which lets you relatively quickly return to the home screen. On the 5, that was apparently a touch sensor. And look, I think most people know what I think of touch sensors. I don't like them. They're always fiddly. You're always finding them going wrong. I don't like them, for example, when they have them on earbuds. I always just feel like I'm pushing things into my ear. Here, I'm not pushing something into my ear, but I totally appreciate having a proper button here. That feels like a nice big upgrade to me. Here in Australia, Google, the owners of Fitbit, sell the Fitbit Charge 6 in 3 different colour variants. So you can pick from porcelain with a silver aluminium body, coral with a champagne gold body, or obsidian with a black aluminium body, and it's the latter that Google sent me for review. Now, black in tech products, look, yeah, it's very much an everyday kind of colour, but then it also kind of goes with just about everything. It's black. And it works well, it looks reasonable. It's probably the colour I would buy if I was buying one myself, to be honest. Now, I do still have a slight preference for watch-style devices rather than the band style of the Fitbit Charge 6. But I appreciate that's 100% a subjective matter. If you don't like or don't care about the look of a watch, this will be fine for you. Vertical screens on wearables are always a little bit of a challenge, but here I think Fitbit does a couple of things kind of smartly. So the text layout is already pretty good, but if you found that some of the text was a little bit small, you can use a triple tapping mechanism to magnify the screen either 2 times or 3 times, but you have to enable that in settings. If you're tapping at your Fitbit Charge 6 and it's not working, the reason is you probably haven't enabled that in settings. So go do that, magnify away to your heart's content. On the performance front, as you might expect from a Fitbit device, the Fitbit Charge 6 runs via the free Fitbit app for Android or iOS. Now, that marks it out as special in itself because so many wearables these days sit in just the one camp. If you want the Pixel Watch 2, for example, that's Android only. If you want the Apple Watch Series 9, that's iPhone only. This straddles both camps. Mostly, there's a couple of little things that this will do on Android that it won't do on iPhone. The other big change here is that this is a really Googlified Fitbit. And so look, yes, it does the usual kind of fitness tracking. It's got heart rate sensors, it'll do stress tracking and ECG, but it's also equipped with a bunch of Google-specific activities and features. So for an example, if you're using Google Maps and you've got the Fitbit Charge 6 on your wrist, you'll get turn notifications as you move around. Now, you can't start map searches. You can't say, hey, I want to find this thing from the Charge 6 itself. You've still got to go back to your watch. But having that little extra impetus and potentially not having to pull your phone out at certain times might make you feel more confident about walking around, or in some cases actually quite a bit safer in some tourist areas, if you know what I'm talking about. Likewise, on the music front, the Fitbit Charge 6 can act as a remote control for YouTube Music, which is fine in theory. Here, though, I have a little bit more of a problem with it, simply because it's YouTube Music only. There's no other music control, even though a lot of wearables will do that kind of simple play pause stuff at least. For this, you have to be using YouTube Music for that to make any sense at all, which means that you've got to be spending, well, here in Australia, $12.99 a month on YouTube Music or $16.99 a month on YouTube Premium for that feature to make any sense at all. I really would have liked Google to just open this up and just say, look, yeah, okay, you can at least play pause your music, for example, while you're doing a workout, no matter what the app is, but they haven't gone down that route. The Charge 6 is also NFC equipped for contactless payments. Now, that's not new for a Fitbit, but what's new here is that they've shifted from Fitbit Pay, the Fitbit-specific banking app, to Google Wallet, Google's own version of the same. And you might think, well, hang on, Fitbit's owned by Google. Is there really that much of a difference? I just put it up against a sensor and it pays for stuff, doesn't it? Well, yes, and that does work. The big point of difference, and where I feel that this is an upgrade for Australian buyers at least, is that there's a lot more banks and credit unions and financial institutions that support Google Wallet relative to those that support Fitbit Pay. Now, totally, if this is important to you, you should check with your financial institution, see what they support, because if they support Fitbit Pay and they don't support Google Wallet, although I think that's kind of rare, then maybe an older Fitbit with NFC would be better for you, but more of them support Google Wallet. You're more likely to be able to do contactless payments with this through Google Wallet. The Google feature set aside, the Fitbit Charge 6 also impressed me because it keeps things simple. With just a simple side-swiping gesture to access tiles for notifications and exercise, alarm, timers, an EDA scan, ECG, Google Maps, and the aforementioned YouTube Music. Exercise is mostly well-handled. I mean, this is a Fitbit. You'd expect that. It should be able to do that. That's just table stakes. There is the small proviso, though, that if you're looking for a more obscure exercise, at least for the initial setup of it, you have to scroll quite a ways to get to it. It's going to take you a bit of time to get all the way down to yoga, for example. It does tend to remember the exercises you've done, though, so you don't have to do that too much, unless you do a lot of varied exercises, I guess. I'm mostly a running and walking type guy, but your own usage can, of course, vary. There's also the option to have the Fitbit Charge 6 automatically detect workouts for you. Again, not unique and mostly well handled. I did have one instance with a park run where I did a little warm-up walk before I started running, and it interpreted that as part of my run and then declared 75%, 80% of the way back on the 5K that I was done. Oh, that was my 5K done. Well, no, it wasn't. It misfired in that case, but you can always disable that too, and that's probably what I would do with very distance-specific things like that. I do also rather like the gentle pestering way that the Fitbit Charge 6 gets me to get up out of this very chair. Now, again, not a unique feature. Lots of devices have a, hey, it's time to stand kind of reminder. The fact that this quantifies this with a number, it says, hey, you've done this many steps this hour, really tends to just fire the little maths part of my brain to say, oh yeah, I probably should get up and stretch, which is good for me. This is a plus. This is positive pester power at work, and I like it. Then there's sleep tracking. And look, the sleep tracking is interesting. It's certainly not foolproof. Like a lot of these sleep trackers, if I'm lying down in bed but I'm not moving that much because I'm just watching something or whatever, it can't really detect if I'm fully asleep versus if I'm just lightly sleeping. So I have had a couple of scores where it's tended to give me a little bit more time than I know I was asleep for. But that's part of the territory, and it does okay, and it is part of your general health story. So all of that works reasonably well. Also, one big call out here for sleep tracking, because this is a thinner and lighter kind of tracker, it's a lot more comfortable to wear while sleeping. I've had this issue with some watch-style wearables where they'll snag on the bed sheets and stuff, or I'll kind of gently thump myself in the face while I'm asleep and wake up. I've not had that problem with this because it's lighter, it's thinner. I can sleep more comfortably with it on. Big plus there. Big minus, though, for the way that Fitbit handles data, and I've had this complaint as well with the Pixel Watch 2. I would have this with other Fitbit trackers, because like the Pixel Watch 2, the Fitbit Charge 6 gives you basic fitness metrics for free. But if you want advanced features like a daily readiness score or the advanced sleep metrics, then after the 6-month trial that you get with the Fitbit Charge 6 is up, you're going to be out of pocket $14.99 a month for them. And I think that's a bit rich. Now, I get that there are workouts, there are other features at play here, but for those kinds of metrics, I can't see how the processing of data that I'm already giving to Fitbit should cost that much to do each month. Essentially speaking, they're charging it because they can. I don't really feel like they should. I'd be interested in your feedback. Do you think Fitbit Premium is worth it in all instances? Is there something that I'm missing in this service that makes it a must-buy feature? Let me know in the comments below. Then we come to notifications, and notifications for me are a really key area of wearables. And harking back to that original Pebble, that was the one thing that the Pebble did so well and so uniquely in its time. The Fitbit Charge 6 can do notifications, but you've sort of got to work for them. You've got to enable them in a couple of different ways. Depends on whether or not you're on iOS or Android, exactly how that works. But then you've also got to set them on a per-app basis, generally speaking. It confused me for a while as to why I wasn't getting a whole bunch of notifications that I should be seeing on the Fitbit Charge 6. And the reason fundamentally was because I hadn't set those apps, and sometimes I had to search them. It's a slightly fiddly process. I wish it was a little bit easier. I wish it was a little bit more just of a straight toggle, but I can also appreciate some people might love the granularity to say, right, well, I never want the notifications from this coming up on my Fitbit, but I do want the notifications from that. Horses for courses, I guess. One limitation with those notifications, though, relative to some smartwatches, is, of course, that this is still just a fitness tracker at heart. So with a lot of those notifications, essentially it's just a, hey, you got a notification, you're going to need to open the app on your phone to do whatever it is you need to do with that notification. On Android, you can send quick responses to text messages. On iOS, you cannot. But if you need that bigger app power, shall we say, this is not going to satisfy you. However, I get the feeling, I get the impression for a lot of people that the notifications themselves are enough. And that simply being able to say, right, well, I know that there's an email, or I know that that thing that I just got was some meaningless social media. I can ignore it and get on with my work and look at that later. For a lot of people, I think that's enough, and this works mostly. On the battery front, Google doesn't specify a battery capacity for the Fitbit Charge 6, but it does suggest that it's capable of up to 7 days of battery life. Now, I raised my voice there a little bit because up to, of course, is slightly weasel words now, isn't it? Up to could be a minute. Up to could be 7 days. It could be anywhere in between that. But the good news here is they're mostly not fibbing. I would say that 6 days on average is more like what I've been hitting with this particular fitness tracker, but that's still fairly good, and I mean solidly ahead of smartwatches you can buy. And given the feature set that you've got here, given it's got things like NFC on board, for example, which some of those long-life Huawei watches I've tested in the past do not, I would say that's a really, really good result. Recharging is via pogo pin cable. It clips on nicely. It works reasonably well, but like so many of these custom chargers, you really don't want to lose that cable. That's not a good time for anyone. I would have loved to see Qi wireless charging, just simple stuff, but I can accept, given the shape of this thing, that would have been quite difficult to engineer, and it would have pumped the price up, and the price is a really key aspect of the value of this device. So, should you buy the Fitbit Charge 6? Well, look, I drew a comparison at the start of this review to the old school Pebble for a reason. The Pebble only did a few things, but it did them well. And that's exactly what the Fitbit Charge 6 does. For many people who don't need the full bells and whistles of a smartwatch, or, more critically, the price points they command, this could be ideal because it covers the basics really nicely. If you just want basic notifications, good fitness tracking, contactless payment, and good battery life, and you're happy using Google Wallet to do so, at an asking price here in Australia of $259.95, it's an excellent prospect. Easy recommendation. Anyway, that's my take on the Fitbit Charge 6. What did you think? Got any observations? Anything you want to know? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and hit subscribe.